Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to show you how to have an on-off switch for the sound. In other words, how to give the player the option to turn off the sound and then to turn it on again if they change their mind. And I will also show you a command that allows you to change the volume of one or all tracks. For example, if you feel that they're all too loud and you want them to be softer, or want them all to be louder, or if you feel that one is mixed a lot louder than the others and you want to reduce its volume in particular so they're all sort of roughly the same. So let's look at how the on-off switch works in play, what it looks like when you're playing the game, and then I will show you the code to do it. So as you can hear, we've got the atmosphere sort of background, and we've got a new link down here which says sound off. If I click it, the sound goes off, and then if I click it on, the sound comes back on again. And that will work for the other tracks as well that you've seen in the previous video, the tracks that relate to the special encounters. So let's have a look at the code for that. So I've already zoomed in here. What I've done is that in several pages I have an include, which is something that we've talked about before. In this case it's less than include, INCLUDE, space, square bracket, then just the name of the page, sound space on off, so SOUND space ONOFF, and then end square bracket, greater than. So what that does, we've dealt with includes before, but what an include does is it allows you to have code on page A and to include that code on page B. And the reason that you would do that usually is because actually you want the code from page A to be in page A to be in page B, page C, page D, page E, and page F, and so on. In other words, you want the code to be in a lot of different places, and rather than write it out 5 or 6 times, you just write it out once. That also means that if you change the code, you don't have to update those other 5 or 6 pages. It just it sort of does it automatically, and so you don't run the risk of sort of forgetting to fix it in one particular place. And what sound on off is where the command is, which turns the sound on or off, obviously. So what we have here is we center the text on the page using div align equals center. We have a variable SO, which is set to 1 if the sound is on and 0 if the sound is off. So initially it is set to 1. Thus. And then we have an if else /if structure, depending on whether SO is 1, which means depending on whether the sound is on or off. So if it's on, we want to give them the opportunity to turn it off, and if it is off, we want to give them the opportunity to turn it on. So we use a couple of new commands. One is link, and another is another option that you have in audio, or using the audio command. So let's look at the version where SO is 1. In other words, we give them the option to turn the sound off. We have less than, link, LINK, space, quote, sound off, quote, and then we have $SD, greater than. Now, what that means is, well, link says this is a everything between this link and the end of the link, the less than slash link greater than, everything in between there is what I want you to do if this link is clicked. So what this does is, we've already seen links where, as well as taking you to a particular page, it will also set a variable to a particular value. Well, this is a sort of more elaborate version of that. You can have whole routines and if-thens and whatever you want in there as well. But in this case, I've just got two commands. Set SO equals 0, so that the computer now knows the sound is off, and audio colon all and mute. So let's go through all this. I'll go through that later, but let's go through the rest of the link command. So we have link, we have quote, sound off, quote. All that is the text which is displayed. So that could be anything, of course. And then we have this variable, SD. Now this part of the link command is optional. You don't actually have to have it. But what it is the page to go to if the link is clicked. And it can be just a quote and some text and a quote if it's always the same page. But if it's going to be a different page depending on where this sound on off is being included, then you want to have a variable, because, so for example, in Explore, I have, before we include sound on off, I have set XD equal to Explore. So that will include sound on off, which is this page, and it will set the link up so that if the link is clicked, it goes to the page Explore. In other words, it goes back to the page that it's already on. And in other pages which call this sound on off, so for example here, I have SD equal to find and include sound on off. And then, of course, in this particular case, if the link is clicked, it will send the player back to find, i.e. back to the page that it's on. So, whereas if this code was only called on one page, you wouldn't need to have that variable. You could just have, you know, whatever the page was. The page doesn't have to be the same page that the link is. You can set it up to go to a different page. But in this particular case, because I don't want to change anything by clicking this link other than changing the sound, I want the game situation to be exactly the same. So obviously I want to go back to the same page. Sorry, I'll just put that back where it was. Okay, so we have link, quote, sound off, quote, and then SD, which is a variable, then greater than. Set SO equal to 0, well that's easy. And we have this other new command, which is less than audio, which is AUDIO. We've already dealt with some of the audio commands. Space, quote, colon, all, ALL, quote. And as we know from previous videos, that means this command is going to relate to every track that is currently loaded in memory. Now we could make it a specific track instead. So I could have said, for example, Atmos, which is the shorthand for one of the tracks that I've got. But because this command is sound off, we want all of the sounds to go off. Whichever sound is playing, we want it to be affected by this. So we have audio, quote, colon, ALL, quote, and then mute. And mute is different to stop in that the file will sort of, as it were, keep playing, but it'll keep playing at a volume of 0. And of course, practically speaking, that's the same effect as if you'd press stop. But there are certain differences particularly if you unmute it, it won't start again from the beginning. And for example, if you had a sound effect that only played once, and you muted it and unmuted it, it wouldn't play again if it had played right through. Whereas if you stopped and then played it, it would play again. So they're slightly different, but not. I suppose stop is like pressing stop on a VCR or an old tape recorder. That's fairly old technology. A lot of you probably don't know what that means. But whereas mute is like, okay, keep it playing, but turn the volume down to 0. So audio, all, and mute, and then we end the link. But as I say, within link we can have any amount of stuff. If you were doing something else, you could have sort of quite elaborate bits of programming in here if you wanted to. So that's if SO is 1, and then if SO is not 1, well, we know that it's always going to be 0 if it's not 1. We have a very similar link, except that instead of sound off, it says sound on in the middle, which means that it displays the text sound on. And instead of saying set SO equals 0, it says set SO equals 1. And instead of saying audio all mute, it says audio all unmute, which is of course the opposite of mute. It just says sort of put the volume back up to its normal level and continue from where we are. So that is how that works. If I was to mute it, it'll stay muted until and unless I press sound on, but all of the changing of tracks and stuff will still work. So if I start in the dungeon, the main dungeon area, and that's playing the normal background sound, but then if you go to the temple area, there's a different background sound, and if you go to the pool area, there's a different background sound. There's that sort of water dripping in a cave sound instead, and it'll still stop the main atmosphere sound and load up the dripping water sound and start playing it and everything, but it'll do so on volume 0. But then if I press sound on while I'm in the cave, the volume will sort of go back up to normal level, and so we'll have the new audio file playing. Whereas if I'd chosen to stop everything instead of muting everything, I would have to sort of specify, okay, now that you've put the sound back on, I want to find out which bit of music should be playing or which sound file should be playing, and then I want you to start that, etc., etc. But with mute, you don't have to do that. That all keeps running in the background, but doesn't produce any sound. And then if you choose to unmute it, it will go back to where it'll go back to where it was. So that's how you do turning the sound on and off. You can also change the volume, and I did that. It probably wasn't very obvious because you don't have another one for comparison, but here's how you do that. You go less than audio, AUDIO, space, then you specify what tracks you're talking about. In this case, I've specified just Atmos, the general sort of atmosphere sound. I could have done all. I could have had a variable if that variable was set to be something that would make sense to this particular command. But in this particular case, I chose Atmos, and then I just had volume, VOLUME, then another space, and then a number between 0 and 1. 0, of course, will be the same as muting it, but I set it to 0.5, and you can have any number that's between 0 and 1 inclusive, and that is you would use that if you thought that a particular sound was too loud compared to the others. I mean, you You could alter the file directly in an audio program, but if you didn't want to do that, you could just have it set to a lower volume than the others in order to balance it out. And also, if you had sometimes you'll have, instead of just on and off, you'll have a slider, and so you can set it to, you can have the sound effect set to very soft, and this is you would make that happen with this audio, whichever files you want to talk about. In the case of a slider, it would probably be colon all, and then the relevant volume. So that is as much as I want to do in relation to audio for now. I mean, there's other things that you can do, of course, but what I've told you is enough to sort of have simple, simple sort of audio effects in a game. So I'll probably be moving on to other subjects, at least in the immediate future. But I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.